Okay, welcome to another edition of the Edlow podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. We actually have not one but two Edlows here interviewing. So this is going to be a very intense interrogation of Miss Ellen Dubin. Hello, Miss Dubin. How are you?
I look forward to the intense interrogation. Bring it on from both of you. I can't wait.
Yeah, good. Well, I specifically brought Lexi in here because of my four children. She is the biggest Disney nerd, and I say that with all the love and care because I'm also a Disney nerd, but not as much of a nerd as she is. So in fact, I've taken all of my kids kind of one-on-one to Disneyland, and she was the only one who was like finding all the hidden Mickeys, telling me stories about things that she found on YouTube, and all these different things. So hearing the work that you've done with Disney, and also your work in musical theater, I just knew this is one that Lexi needed to help me with because she's going to have all the questions.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I always like to start with just background, and I just want you have an extensive career that's gone all over the place. I mean, you've been in video games, you've done all this stuff with Disney. You were in Napoleon Dynamite, one of my favorites. So you've been in films. Was this something you always wanted to do?
No, I think I'm one of the few. I know I'm one of the few performers that I know that didn't grow up. As a little kid, I want to be an actress. I actually was a very shy child. I'm making up for it. I lost time now, believe me. I was not confident. I was had flat feet, and I was all hunched over. And my parents put me, thank you, Mom and Dad, in ballet class to gain confidence, to have better feet, and just to relate to other kids. And long story short, at the end of each ballet term, there was a recital on the stage. And on the stage, this little dying swan would always add an extra arm wave or, or waited for the audience just naturally. And this is where I became confident on stage performing. There's a misconception. A lot of performers are shy. Or started out shy. And so that helped my feet and helped my backs and relate to other kids. But I fell in love with the stage because of ballet. I always say I became a performer because of flat feet.
That's actually an interesting point because most of my kids, for all of them, have done some sort of performance art.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that, like my son, Lexi's older brother, Austin, he's a brilliant guitar player and a great singer. He does choir. And he had a little high school rock band that was kind of going on playing covers, and he was great. But then you get him off the stage and he has a hard time communicating. Right. And Lexi, maybe you can comment on this. Has that kind of been your experience?
Yeah, usually in like all my classes at school and stuff, I'm usually like the quiet kid who pretty much just sits in the corner and does the work. But then when I'm like on stage, it's a lot easier to do things.
For sure. I identify with what you said exactly. And you just sort of, there's something, I mean, it's not like you're putting on a character, but you're not, because it's really yourself giving your heart and your soul and your guts and your point of view of whatever you're doing, if you're singing or dancing or whatever. But there's something about that, having that audience, and just, it gives you an added confidence. And I'm glad you identify with what I went through, because believe me, I get it. Yeah.
So you seem, it's interesting because in this interview you seem very engaging. I assume that now you've kind of overcome that. Was it strictly the theater, or were there other things that you think kind of changed your perspective, or maybe just with age, as you grew and matured, it got better? What do you think it was?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a combination of everything: experience and age, and some wisdom. Sometimes I wonder, and, like, really? Okay. And also, you're asking good questions, and I feel engaged about something I'm passionate about. So when I'm passionate about something, or I care about something, that gives me confidence. And I think that's the same with most people. If they're talking about something that they truly love, which I do, and that's why I'm so happy to be here with both of you, then I think it just gives you, I feel at ease.
Yeah. I want to ask both of you this question. What is it that you love about acting?
Lexi, you want to go first?
Sure. I think it's like you don't have to worry about people judging you because they don't see you as like you, but like you're still expressing yourself while people can't judge you for it.
Interesting. It's funny because in a way, a lot of people do judge us as performers. But what you're saying now, again, this goes back to that confidence thing with that added level of playing a character or singing and dancing, which I find, by the way, when you sing and dance, it's the most incredible form of expression. That's why I love dancing so much. I love that. It's ironic. I'm doing more voice work now, but I started in a performing art with no speaking, ballet. There's no talking. So it all relates to me because you're expressing yourself. And so I like moving an audience. I like inspiring people. I like making people laugh. And I love when somebody comes up to me and says, you did this show and it really helped me get through a tough time in my life, or you made me laugh, or they'll tell you all your lines in a movie or a TV show that you've done. And you're like, oh, you know that better than me. So I love that connection of connecting and helping people in a different way. And listen, we're not surgeons, heart surgeon or anything, but it's really nice to have people tell you that they've felt akin with you and they felt inspired by you. That's why I love doing it.
Yeah. I gotta say, when you say that, it almost makes it sound, well, we're not doing heart surgery or whatever. That makes it sound like what you're doing isn't as important. But I got to tell you, I remember a quote, I think it was from Mr. Holland's Opus. I don't know if you ever saw the movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, where he goes, if I have to choose between writing and arithmetic and the arts, I'm going to choose writing and arithmetic or whatever. And he says, well, if you get rid of the arts, they're going to have nothing to write about. You know what I mean? And so the acting, the inspiring, I think it's so interesting how you can connect. Like, it's so easy if you want to connect with somebody and engage in conversation to just ask somebody, give me your top 5 favorite movies. Everybody's got them. You know what I mean? And it's an easy way to connect, and it's so interesting to watch and hear other people talk about what inspired them.
Yeah. And it also depends on what part of your life, what's going on in your life at the time as well, too. That order of that move 5 can change. I was just going, what's my 5? That order can change. And but I like what Lexi said about, you don't worry as much about, I mean, yes, when you're on the screen, people are always judging you, but you yourself don't feel as judged. I really like the way you put that. Yeah. I'm adding that to my list.
Yeah. Nice. So Lexi had some questions she wanted to ask. Is there a question you want to pop out right now, Lex?
I do have a few about musicals. So what is your favorite musical and favorite that you've have you participated in any? And if so, what was your favorite to participate in?
Wow. These are great questions. Okay. So my favorite musical, well, it was West Side Story until I saw Hamilton and Hadestown recently. And Les Miserables is also one of my favorite musicals. I think I've seen it about 85 times, but who's counting? My favorite musical that I did something called Sweet Charity, which is a famous musical that starred, I don't know, this is before your time, Lexi, Shirley MacLaine. She did Sweet Charity. And I loved doing that because it was a lot of singing and dancing. And I did a very famous musical with a lot of tap dancing, and I stink at tap, but I faked it. And it's called No, No, Nanette. And my other favorite one, this was my last musical, was A Chorus Line, which is a very famous musical about the life of dancers. And that was my bucket list before my knees gave out to do that show. So those are some of my favorites.
You guys share some favorites there, huh, Lex?
Yeah, my top favorite is probably Les Mis.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen both Hadestown and Hamilton. And so big fan. And so I actually just I know Lexi is annoyed that she missed this, but my son and I recently got to see Phantom of the Opera on the West End. And so so it was pretty amazing. And so seeing that, you know, it was one of the most, that it was interesting. That's one of the reasons why I find musical theater so interesting was how you can, that was probably the third time I'd seen it. And the first two times I'd seen it was not there. And I didn't get the hype. And then I saw it that third time and it was so awe-inspiring. It was almost like take your breath away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's so interesting how the one thing I love about musical theater versus movies is that you can see the same play over and over and it's different every time. Even the same production, you can go back. Like Lexi has done a bunch of productions at our local theater where they do a lot of kids shows. And I've gone 4 or 5 times to her shows, and it's fun to watch opening night versus closing and watch how they change things in the middle. And, you know, when someone messes up and how they try to hide it and things like that, it's actually a lot of fun. So
Lexi, do you like Wicked?
Oh yeah. That was my favorite.
I figured as much too. Yeah, mine too. And I just recently saw it. And honestly, speaking of awe-inspiring, I still get shivers up my spine in that end of the first act, like the chandelier in Phantom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or I still get the, you know, the ooh, my back when they do Defying Gravity and off goes that flying. There's certain moments you just can't beat live theater.
Yeah,
you just can't.
Yeah.
Let's
go ahead.
Okay, so I recently saw Waitress, you know, here in Sacramento, and it was the person who played Jenna, she has played her on Broadway, which was really cool. And the person who played the doctor, I just forgot his name, but he was continuously messing up. The place where I went, it was Theater in the Round, and so for the door of the doctor's office, they had it like come down into one of the because they would enter and like do dances and stuff in the things between the seats.
Yes.
And so it came down and he accidentally hit it and it was like rocking back and forth for a long time.
And what was your focus on in that show at that time? The rocking, right?
Yeah. And he tried to fix it, and there was also like there was a paper and he accidentally dropped it and it was just flying around him and he kept trying to grab it and he kept messing up over and over again, and it was so funny just to watch him like try and fix it, like try and fix his mistakes and go along.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all been there. When things have fallen down. What were you going to say?
I was gonna add. The other show when I was in London, I saw Back to the Future, and they had the guy. Oh, it's great. It's great. It's like 80s cheesy, but in a good way, right? And so, but the guy who was Doc Brown, I can't remember his name, but I talked to one of the box office guys, and apparently he had moved to the West End from Broadway specifically to do it. But you could tell that he was having so much fun doing it and just loved. It looked like he was trying to break Marty the whole time. Like he kept trying to do things to make him break.
Oh yeah.
And one time Marty messed something up and he really, you know, went off script a little bit to mess with them, and it was just a lot of fun. Can you remember a time maybe when you had someone had a real mess up you had to cover?
Well, speaking of somebody making them laugh, I did my first show where I became an equity member, which is to become a union member. I did a show called Fiddler on the Roof. And the guy who played my husband decided, during the wedding, to put, there's like a glass of wine as part of the ceremony. He put goldfish. This guy always tried to make me laugh. So I'm about to drink the wine, and I go, "You have it." Oh, I could not. You have it. So he turned upstage, and I made him laugh because he would do stuff like that. He put false teeth in. One time in that play, I had to carry some suitcases because we were leaving town. It was a very sad scene. And he put 50-pound weights in each suitcase. And he said, "Darling," and I lifted the suitcase and I did the same thing. "Oh, I'm too traumatized. I'm too depressed. Please, you take me." You know, he was awful. Awful, awful, awful. I could honestly, I learned that summer to my concentration level had to be so firm. I couldn't look at him. He was the worst to try and make me laugh. And then the other incident that happened to me that was not man-made was the set fell down.
Mm-hmm.
And it really blocked a lot of the stage. So we really, thank goodness I had great actors to work with, and we kind of improvised the blocking and changed things, but the audience was howling, howling. And I think at one point they finally had to stop in the middle of the play. The stage manager came out, the stage manager, and said, okay, we have to stop. Let's pick up the set and we'll resume. So that was pretty crazy. Wow, live theater. Yeah.
That's fun. So Lexi, did you have another musical question?
I don't have a question, but I do have a funny situation.
Tell us.
So I played Timon in Lion King, like Lion King Kids. It was a little while ago, a couple of years ago, but I still remember this like so clearly. In the He Lives in You. So you know how he says like Simba and then father?
Yes.
On closing night, we dared him to say daddy instead, and he ended up forgetting his line and actually said it. And everyone could not stop laughing after that. So it was like just a constant throughout the whole song we were all like laugh singing, and it was hilarious.
It's hard to get through it, but the audience loves that stuff. That's when the audience is along for the ride, right? They eat it up. They like mistakes. They do.
Did you move? So moving from ballet, was that your next step going into musical theater? And when were you where were you in age when you kind of moved in?
Late teens, because ballet and my knees gave out, and a major audition for a ballet company. It was actually a huge traumatic turning point in my life. I did an audition, and my knees, you know what a plie is? It's a deep knee bend, and my knees literally gave out. I could not get off the floor. It was one of the most, now I can talk about it, but most humiliating times of my life. There's a whole panel of judges there to get you into a company, and all I remember is being carried off and coming back to Toronto. I was in New York at the time auditioning, and then my whole career path changed, and I thought, okay, I have the dance, I need to take singing. I was always striving for more. I want to do musicals because I love musicals, and so I took scene study, I took singing, I took jazz dancing because I was very laced and very upright, and I needed to loosen up a bit to do musical theater kind of dancing. And I took tap, but I sucked at it. And jazz, I finally got the hang of it. And so I started to take classes because I knew my knees gave out, my body, I grew too tall. Things just didn't work for me. I was a better dancer, what's the word, emotionally, but physically, I just wouldn't have the stamina to be a ballet dancer. And then musicals, and then I started doing musicals. And I remember one time during one of the shows, I went, oh, I have to cry right now, and I don't know how to do it. I was just relying on sheer energy and sheer youth. And I started taking more scene study classes and more, and Keanu Reeves was my first scene partner.
Really?
Yes, he was. Wow. in my class, and we actually reminisced about that about 3 months ago. And wow. Yeah, it's kind of cool that we did this crazy scene from a play called Key Exchange, where we're a young couple, and the key exchanges, we're going to move in with each other, and we're going to exchange keys. And it's a scene, and I'm going to tell you the story. It's just a weird segue, but it's very funny. So we're sitting on the floor in the acting class, and it's a very famous teacher from New York named Carol Rosenfeld. I love you, Carol. She's still alive, and we still keep in touch. And she was always the hardest on the people that she knew might have a career, because I used to be afraid of her. And anyway, so in this scene, we have to open a champagne bottle and celebrate that we're in love and we're going to move in together. So Keanu, as his character, I forget the name of the character, has to open the champagne bottle. Now, in an acting class, you're supposed to prepare it and kind of set it up and have the cork already ready. Keanu couldn't be bothered. So he and you know how hard it is to open a champagne bottle. Yeah, the cork goes across the room and jetsons in her head, and hits the teacher in her head. And we looked at each other. We were both sitting on the floor and like on a picnic blanket for the scene. And we looked at each other, and she stood up. She said, "Look at him. Look how disciplined she is. Every single prop she picks up, she's prepared. She knows who held the prop. You are going to amount to nothing if you continue like that." So, and it's one of the most famous acting classes in terms of that speech, because everybody laughs their head off. And obviously Keanu, well, yeah, he's kind of famous, and he's actually an incredible human being, which is even more important. But
that is,
and now and then she'll say, I used to say that to a couple of people. I said, "Are you sure that you didn't make a mistake?" Now I can joke with her, but anyway, it was a segue, and I forget how we got to that, but it's a good story.
Yeah, the thing about Keanu Reeves, it's interesting. The first movie pre Bill and Ted, he did Parenthood with Steve Martin and Rick Moranis and a whole bunch of people. But there's a scene in that movie, he's playing basically the Ted character most of the time. Yeah. But the thing, it's interesting because I even think Jim Carrey had one of these in Ace Ventura, where there's a moment where he's talking about a serious moment when he's talking about his dad, and where he says something along the lines of, you need a license to drive a car, you need a license to deal with fish, but anyone can be a father. And then he immediately snaps back into like the Ted character on the screen. And I was like, wow, that's some pretty good range to be able to go real serious like that and then go right back to being this doofus stoner Ted.
Yeah.
And
it makes the comedy too, but you could see the vulnerability.
Yeah. It was actually really, really cool. And so what made you get the transition from musical theater into film and voiceover? How did that work?
Again, the body. I'll tell you, being a triple threat is very admirable, by the way. I think musicals are one of the hardest genres to do. And I used to get nervous. I was a good singer, but at auditions, I could not present myself well singing. I couldn't hit the notes. And then the second I'd leave in the car or in the shower before, it would be, wow. So I thought, auditions. So I wanted to move on to, I was doing a lot of theater, like Shakespeare and straighter theater with dramas. And I did a lot of farces, like British farces and stuff. And those were fun. And then I always wanted to do more. I did improv. And then I got into film and television because a lot of science fiction was going on at the time when I started television. And because the theater gives you a strong background with voice and movement, a lot of sci-fi likes to cast people with a theater background, and they like more interesting types of actors. So there's something about a lot of sci-fi actors that has a presence or a bearing that comes from movement and, great Shakespeare training and use of language. And that's what you do in the theater. And singing, all that stuff kind of elevates you in the sci-fi genre. And so that's how I got into television, right after that, just was antsy to just do more. I always wanted to learn. And I'm still learning, I always believe in that. So that's how I got into that. And voiceovers is my latest career. That's only 14 years old.
Wow. So, Lexi, did you have any questions on that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So I want to, in your, obviously I told you off air, I'm a huge Napoleon Dynamite fan. So now that started as an independent film. Were you doing a lot of independence, or was there something about that movie that you wanted to be a part of, or how did that kind of come about?
This is a great story. Here we go. So remember I just mentioned about the sci-fi. So one of the producers of Napoleon Dynamite had interviewed me about this crazy show, which was the sci-fi show that put me on the map, called Lex. And there was a magazine called Cinescape, which was a big sci-fi magazine at the time, a gorgeous hard copy. And he interviewed me about that show. He was a huge Lex fan. Fast forward, a couple of years later, he said, I'm producing a movie. He said, how would you like to go to Preston, Idaho? I went, okay, where is it? But here, You know, it's in Salt Lake City. He said, we'll fly you, we'll put you in a hotel, and we'll pick you up in Salt Lake City, and then we'll drive you to Preston, Idaho. I think the population was like 2,800 or something.
Yeah, I've driven through there a number of times.
You have?
If you ever, yeah, well, so actually, we're Mormon, and I went on a mission, and some of my friends were from like Preston, Malad, like all those areas. And I always say, if you ever want to bury a body, Preston, Idaho is a pretty good place.
Hilarious. But wouldn't everybody know? Because everybody knew, it was the best. Everybody knew each other. And, you know, so because of this, this is a thing for your listeners. You never know where one thing is going to lead to another. So I always do the best job I can do. And I'm always pleasant to people. It's not hard for me to do, but you never know where someone's going to land. So that's just a little segue here, a side thing. So Chris, who was the writer of this article, became the producer of Napoleon Dynamite. And I got to tell you, this is the little engine that could. I love stories that people embrace. And again, it's the nerd in all of us. I believe that every single decent person in the world has a nerd inside all of them. If not, you know, why would we all of us love pop culture and all kinds of things? So,
right.
You know, to be honest with you, nobody knew where it would go.
Right.
I mean, this movie was made for, what was it, $250,000 or something?
Yeah.
What I liked about it was feeling part of a community. Everybody that worked on that movie, you know, Jared Hess and Jerusha, his wife, who wrote the script and he directed it, and John Heder, almost everybody was part of Preston, Idaho, in that community. And we worked in the schools. We worked in the place where I shot most of my scenes was an actual person who John Heder grew up with, his neighbor. Like everything was contributed, and you know, everybody donated their time, and you know, I think we got paid like $100 a day. It was a SAG ultra low budget. And honestly, one of the best times I've ever had.
Really, you know, the interesting thing about that, I got to say, as someone who's been through it and know people from there, you guys hit it dead on what it's like out there. Like, yeah. I mean, even down to them playing Forever Young at the that is classic. Like, that is classic Idaho, Salt Lake City, Mormon type stuff. Like, it was like just dead on. I was like, this is incredible. Like, people are laughing at this. This is real life out there. That's what it looks like.
Well, but they did it so well. And honestly, I don't think there's a movie like that where the characters are so unique.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen that. And I have to tell you, when I opened John Heder, I never saw him till I opened the door as my character, Eileen, for the first time. And if people know me really well, you'll see the Dubin smirk, because I had to bite my tongue because the look was so funny. Did you go to the dance? When I opened that door, I went, oh my God, how am I going to say my first line? This guy is so hilarious. And I thought he was brilliant because he's a very handsome guy, and he's very different than that. But it was just brilliant. And working with John Grease, who played Uncle Rico, who's had major success in a show called White Lotus in the last couple seasons with the crazy and wacky Jennifer Coolidge. He's such a brilliant actor. I was so privileged to work with him. And Ephraim Ramirez, who played Pedro, it was our second movie together. We did a really cheesy, bad B movie, our first movie in LA, called Tammy and the Teenage T-Rex. You got to look at that one. And it starred Denise Richards and the late, great Paul Walker and myself and Terry Kaiser from Weekend at Bernie's. Remember that movie? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great movie.
That guy, he's a brilliant comedian. And Ephraim and I, when we saw each other, we were hanging on the swings in this backyard in between scenes, eating Cheese Whiz on Wonder Bread and having apple slices. And people were like, oh, I said, it was the best. Like, oh, I don't care about a steak dinner. I don't care about that. I had the best time, and reminiscing with Ephraim and getting to know this group, and we all went out for dinner a couple of times. It was a very special time in my life.
That's awesome. Lexi, you had any questions about that?
I mean, What was your favorite part of working in doing Napoleon Dynamite?
Well, the favorite part of working on it was the fact that it became a comedy of a generation, that it's one of the most, Forbes listed it as one of the most iconic comedies of all times.
Yeah.
That I got to tell you. And people, I get an email from people every single day about that movie and how people can quote the whole movie. So that's so rewarding.
It's got to be cool when you do something like that, where you don't really know where it's going to go. It's really low budget, but looks like kind of fun. And then it blows up like that. That had to be pretty cool.
It was very unpredictable and extremely thrilling. Yeah, no, you could not have predicted that on paper. I remember reading this. I was in Los Angeles at the time, and I looked at this and went, "What is this?
Yeah.
What is a llama and tater tots? And what is this crazy movie?" And anyway,
who do you think? Like, who of the actors of the characters, you mentioned the characters being so distinct and so, you can just, everybody knows Uncle Rico and Pedro and Napoleon and Kip, like they know all those people. Who is so different? Like, is there someone who's just completely different from their character, or someone who is actually like their character in that movie?
I'll go back to John Grease, because he plays sort of this, I think I'm the best athlete. He's still, relying on those old days when he was a star athlete. He is such a humble guy. And that little toupee he had on, we kept, he doesn't have hair, but I think he was the most different in real life. And I didn't get to know, some of the other actors as well, but I hung with him mostly. And Ephraim is not as shy as Pedro. He's not. It's sort of that nerdy, shy type of character. What's also interesting is the energy in that movie. When you do comedy, it's usually a more fast pace. Directors are always saying when you do comedy, faster, faster, faster. This was very bizarre. Jared Hess, the director, was extraordinarily specific. He sort of told us how he wanted it. He says, I want this really slow. So if you notice, and it's unusual, watch again, the pace is very slow. Napoleon is slow. We talk slowly, because he said, Ellen, because I have fast energy, naturally, he said, Ellen, take down your energy, slow it down. And it worked. It was brilliant. So anyway, that's just a little side note, tidbit about that directing.
That's so interesting. When you're preparing for a role, is there something that you do to really, I took some acting classes in college. I'm a lawyer. So I was like, and I wanted to be a trial attorney. So I'm like, well, I better do stuff to get me up in front of people. So I took a bunch of acting classes. And one of the things I remember from the acting classes was them talking about rounding out the character, kind of coming up with your own backstory, things like that. Is there something you do like that when you get a character you're going to play, to kind of round out that character and bring them to life?
Yeah. I'm a huge researcher, and then I throw it away. So, for example, if I play a character that's very opposite to me, or has a different background or a different accent, I'll look up the country they're from. I'll study with an accent coach. I'll figure out with the wardrobe person how they would dress. It's very important to me what I put on my body when I'm acting. Shoes are really important. Is this person in high heels? Is this person in sneakers? Because it changes your gait, the way you move. And as a dancer, my first love and my first background, I find a character's movement can really show what they're about and how they sit and how they stand and what their voice is like. So I work kind of inwardly as well as outwardly. I'm a combination actor that way. Every actor works differently. It depends on the part, but I do a lot of research. I do.
Interesting. What are the big differences that you see between being, say, doing live theater versus doing film?
Well, the immediate reaction of an audience versus an editor editing the film, and you don't have control over your performance. You have more control over your performance on stage because it's you live, doing it, your own body and your face and everything else, and the words of the playwright. But film, you do the performance with the other actor, then it goes into an editing bay. You don't know how it's going to end up. You don't have final approval unless I was Tom Cruise or something and sit in the editing room, but you don't have final say as to what the product is going to be and what the outcome or which take they're even going to do. Remember, on stage you have one take. It's live. Whatever happens, happens, as we talked about earlier. On film, you can get 2 or 3 or 85, depending on the director. You're not 85, and then they pick the one they want in the end. So it's out of our control.
Do you have? I mean, you've done all sorts of different things, but is there like a dream role that you would love to have?
Well, in the musical theater world, I'd like to do Mama Rose in Gypsy. And I'd have to get back to singing again. I think it's amazing. I don't have the voice for Phantom of the Opera or Les Mis. There's nothing in that for me, so I can't do that. I don't know. To be determined in film and television, for sure. I've been really focusing. I would like to get a comedy series like A Simpsons or something like that in an animated world. It would be fun to do something continuous.
Yeah.
I'm recurring on a couple of animated series right now, which is really great. But I'd love to do something that's like a regular.
Interesting. So, Lexi, did you have a question?
I mean, it's something kind of related to like animated stuff.
Okay.
But, okay. Well, I was like looking up some of the things that you've been in, and I noticed that Turning Red came up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I wanted to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my throat's being weird. Like, what was that like to be part of that?
Well, again, a film that meant a lot to a lot of people and also was Oscar nominated. It's always wonderful to be part of an Oscar nominated movie. And it was my first Pixar movie. That was one of my dreams, actually. You know, one of my bucket list dreams is to get into a Pixar movie. It's very difficult to get into original animation. They like to cast a lot of, you know, A-list movie stars in animation. But, you know, this was an audition and they liked what I did and I got it on the merit of my audition. And I'm very happy to be part of a movie that focused on the Asian culture in Toronto, which is my hometown where I was born. So I knew a lot of the places that were in the movie. And she's a wonderful director. And I liked that it was female centric on a young girl, which I'm sure you appreciated too, and all the trials and tribulations.
Yeah, it probably one of my favorite Pixar movies.
It was incredible movie.
So, what was it about transit? Like, did you kind of fall into voiceover, or was that something you really wanted to try?
My mother always wanted me to do voiceover, and I never did it. And then I was in an interview in Los Angeles at my commercial agency, and she said, "Are you doing voice?" I said, "No, I should do it." She says, "Come here." She was an old school agent, and she walks me across the hallway to my agent that I'm still with now, Vox Inc. in Los Angeles. Thank you, Vox Inc. And she says, "I want you to meet Ellen Dubin. She's a very experienced stage actor and film and television and blah, 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 blah." So literally we had a meeting there and he said, "You have a demo reel." And I said, "No, just watch my video, you know, my film and television reel and close your eyes." He laughed so hard. He says, "I got to take you. You have balls." And I remember going out of there going, "Ooh, how did that come up?" You know, just it was the luck of the draw. And, you know, and it's been a steady climb, you know, a couple years they stuck with me where I only got one job in 2 years. And you do it's a numbers game, but I kept studying. I studied narration, I studied promo, I studied animation, I studied video games, which is my favorite genre within voiceovers. I just kept studying and studying because even though it's a different genre, it's all about acting, but how do you approach that genre? How do you approach the fact that you're all alone in your little booth here and there's no other actor and there's no set, there's no costumes, there's no outdoors or indoors, There's only you. So that is a whole technique in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it. I think it's a great challenge.
Interesting. You mentioned video games. Why is that your favorite?
It's my favorite because of the emotional arcs of the storylines. I've had some of my best parts in video games, believe it or not. And I also like the challenge of cold reading because everybody's so protective of their properties now. Nobody wants you to see the dialogue. You get in the booth, and that minute, usually almost 99% of the time now, you do the dialogue right there and then. So I like cold reading. I like diving. And I think all my acting training, especially the stage, which gives you the meat and potatoes, I think it's still the greatest of the arts because you have to be able to summon up emotional content on a much more deep level. Video games demand that because there's always something at stake. There's a zombie about to attack you, or the king is going to behead you, or if you're doing a fantasy piece. So I just love it because I love the challenge of reading off the cuff, and I love bringing up different emotions really quickly in great plots. And it's so cinematic now. I feel like I'm doing a feature film.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, I grew up with original Nintendo, and now, I mean, these things are just like they're crazy. I mean, how good they are. Did you have a favorite video game?
Yeah, one I'm not in, The Last of Us.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Oh, it's just I love the video games where I'm not just going on the ground now, move. I mean, I like the military games too, but I love the ones where you care about people and their relationships, and I just love that one. They're very sophisticated now. The dialogue is really, really incredible.
Yeah. Lexi, did you have a question about any video games?
No.
Okay. I want to get to what I'm sure you're the most interested about, and that is how did you end up getting into Disney?
Well, I got to tell you, that was one of my dreams to get into Disney. Let's talk about the narration of the theme parks. So my agent, Vox, Tom Lawless, sent me an audition. So this is for the theme park narration. That's all he said. So I did it, and I booked it. And I went to the studio in Glendale, and I was crying inside. All these images of different Disney characters, and it is stunning, and they're playing beautiful music. And I get into this studio, and they put a children's choir and violins behind me when I did the 60th anniversary of Disneyland, opposite Walt Disney. They actually superimposed us together, our voices. I actually, in the middle, I had to stop. And the guy who was the creator of the 60th anniversary, he said, "Your reaction is exactly what I want the public to do." I started crying. It moved me so greatly that I got to live my childhood dream doing the narration of the park and all the World of Colors as well in California Adventureland. So I was one of the few women that was doing a voice in Disneyland and also in the Adventureland. So both parks I was simultaneously having voices done there. So honestly, one of my biggest dreams. It moved me so greatly. And then when I went to the park and heard it, I was with a friend, and I just went, shiver me timbers. Yeah. I bawled my eyes out. I cried my eyes out. So that was a bucket list. And then again on audition, booking Captain Phasma from Star Wars in LucasArts, which is now Disney, was another bucket list to do Star Wars and the Lego Star Wars. I always wanted to. I love the combination of the kids' toys and Star Wars, and they have a huge fan base. I mean, who doesn't want to have Star Wars and Disney on the resume? I mean, and then I got Dune.
Yeah.
So the most iconic franchises.
Yeah.
So no, I'm still can't believe. I have to pinch myself about the Disney thing, Lexi. I still can't believe it. Yeah.
So Lexi, I'm sure you got some questions on Disney. Fire away.
Yeah. So what was you've done multiple things, right?
Yeah.
What was your favorite one to do?
The favorite of all my Disney stuff? I have to go back to that theme park. I have, because thousands and thousands of people heard me on a daily basis. You know, you walk into the theme park and you hear my big booming voice welcoming you and discussing and talking about the history of Disneyland and the orange groves. It used to be just all orange groves, and now it's become a big Disney park. That was pretty rewarding. And also, I have to tell you, playing Captain Phasma in tribute to Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones, because she's Captain Phasma, and I had to kind of emulate her voice. And I felt obligated in a good way because she's such a brilliant performer. So I studied, speaking of research, everything that Gwendolyn Christie ever did. So even though we didn't get a lot of footage of Captain Phasma because the movie had just come out, but the sound engineer worked on the movie. And when he worked on my Lego Star Wars and Star Wars Resistance, he said, "You sound exactly like her." And to me, that from an engineer who worked with her, that was great validation. So that was another very rewarding Disney moment for me too. Yeah.
There was also, so you were part of World of Color, right? I saw that last time I went to Disneyland.
Yeah.
It was like really, really good. Have you like gone to see it since you did that? Have you?
No, and you know what? I sadly never saw heard or saw the World of Color. I saw it on somebody's iPhone on YouTube. You know, a lot of people put these things up. So no, I never saw it, but I did 4 of them. I know I did like one was a Christmas special, and I can't remember the other ones. But there was 4 I did, and another. People really complimented me on that too, but I never heard it in person. I'm glad it was good. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, it was probably one of my favorite things to see at Disneyland. It was like so like inspiring, like everything. The way that they can like project stuff onto water.
It's
like green.
Those creators. Steve Davidson is the creator of all those shows. They are brilliant, Lexi. They know how to do music. They know how to do lighting and video feeds. And the use of color. I mean, they've planned this for years. They're probably planning the next thing, you know, in 10 years from now. They're brilliant. That's all they do is spectacles and huge immersion. They're called immersions. Immersive theater, speaking of theater.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of like the Disney, like the documentaries on the like all the things with Disney parks, like the behind the attraction stuff. That's something that I'm like really into watching and stuff. So I watched stuff like one of them was about like World of Color and the shows and stuff. And I noticed that apparently like it came from one of the light parades. Someone saw one of the lights parades and they wanted something else that was like something bigger that was related to light, and that's how it came to be.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just
bigger
thought
and better this time. Yeah. Have you been to the E23 conventions? Have you guys gone to the Disney big conventions? Yeah, me neither, but I'd like to go. I hear it's amazing. Yeah, I think it's called E23, something like that.
Yeah. I'm sure that's the one that Lexi would want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, I want to. I know it also mentioned that you did stuff for Disney Paris.
Yes. Apparently, they used my voice for Disney Paris and Disney Tokyo and Disney Shanghai. I was the voice model. I guess they liked the tone, and I guess they cast people there. But I also did Disney Paris. I think I did their 25th anniversary narration. So they did use my voice. They didn't en français. They didn't do French. No, they did. They did my voice there. So which was really neat. I never heard, and I didn't know anybody in Paris to tell them to go. So I should look it up, see if it's on Google somewhere. See if it's out there. Let me know if you find it.
Yeah, we will. So, did you have something, Lexi? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say one of the things I want to do when I'm older is probably try and go to every Disneyland. So
yeah. And you could write a book and compare them.
That's true. I could.
Good idea.
You know, I have a question for you. You've obviously had a very colorful career. You've done a lot of different things. For someone who may be an aspiring actor on this interview or listening, who would want to get started, what do you think is a characteristic that you have that made you successful when so many others maybe weren't?
Persistence, stamina, don't take no for an answer. And as I got older, I realized that I was enough. When you're starting out, you don't think that you're enough, that you want to try and please. And not that you don't want to please people and you don't want people to be happy with your work, but I was always trying to fit in and figure out, oh, maybe this is what they want. Maybe this is what they want. So I'm now saving everybody time listening that you are enough. And if you push through that, and we all have dry periods in our career, you have to really want it. And you have to really realize that it's not about money, because most performers make under $6,000 a year. So you have to really love what you do. And I know it's a cliche, but I keep telling people, after 2 years, oh, I haven't started a movie. I said, are you taking classes? I'm still coaching. I have a coach on auditions. If I go, I'm not getting this. I study with certain people. I'm always learning and striving for more. And that's what I tell people. Don't stay in a rut. If something isn't working, take an improv class. But also, don't only focus on acting. Focus on your family. Focus on other things. Because then you can get so spirally into your own self and have nothing to offer. I think that when you're studying other things, and when I'm very close to my family, and I find that having that support is also very helpful. Yeah. Family number one.
That's great. I also, the other thing, did it ever, like, I'm assuming, this is just me assuming, that there's probably a lot of rejection with that, going through acting and trying to go on auditions. How do you handle that?
It really depends. Let's not kid ourselves. When there's a part that you really want and you don't get it, you can feel this low. And I've dealt with it in many ways. There's been absolute hysterical crying, to getting your favorite piece of ice cream or listening to your favorite music. I tell people, and it's harder than it seems. I give myself a half hour. Once I hear the bad news. Or the other thing is, an acting teacher taught me, just keep doing it, and you're building the foundation. You're not auditioning for the part, you're auditioning for the room. You're auditioning for the next part, which is also a very good thing. So you constantly try and do a good job. And yes, you want the part, but try and go in and have the best time you can. And you are showing them how you are approaching that part in those 3 minutes you have. So you're doing the part in those 3 minutes. You not get it, but it's building a foundation, a relationship with that producer or that casting person. Now there's more leeway. Now there's more openness because of self-tapes. During COVID, a lot of the studios closed down, so people were doing what we're doing now, Zooming or putting themselves on camera, and casting people are looking and listening, if you're doing voice auditions, to more people now. And you don't have to be necessarily in Los Angeles or New York anymore, or a big center. So that's kind of an interesting option. And, rejection is part of the business, but going and have a good time, that's my new thing.
What's the percentage of yeses to nos, realistically? I gotta imagine it's a lot more nos.
There's a lot more nos. You spend a lot more time unemployed than you do employed. And it was at one point, I just wrote this down, my voice agent told me you have to do 80 auditions to book one. And this was about 10 years ago. And now it's about 125 to book one. Now, if you can get those amount of auditions. So you hopefully have somebody that sticks with you and stays with you. And you've got to have, here's the thing, you have to have sort of a thick skin like an armadillo, but you still have to be soft and gushy and vulnerable and be able to do those crying scenes and not be such a tough ass that people are not going to like you.
Right.
A nice little balance.
Right. Lexi, do you have any questions about that, about the process?
So you understand how you know how stressful it is to do auditions and stuff. What do you usually do after an audition when it's like you feel like you haven't done very well? or like
I scream in the car and go, why didn't I do the same thing I did in the shower? Or why didn't I do the same? And you know what? I talk to myself and I berate myself, and then I either phone a friend or I put my favorite piece of music on. This helps, and I sing to it. And actually now before auditions, I put my favorite. A lot of people put like headphones on and listen to their music, something inspiring that gets them inspired. That was more when I was doing in-person auditions. But I find that music can wind me down. Or I can dance, or I dance around in my living room and get the energy out. Or I phone a friend who's sometimes up for the same thing, and we're sort of picking each other's brains and seeing if they got it or they did a better job. And you know, sometimes, Lexi, it's not even about who did a better job. It might be a family that's mixing and matching, or I remind them of their aunt and they didn't like their aunt, or I'm too tall or too short or too pink or too yellow or whatever. And you let it go. Let it go. Let it go.
Nice. Do you have any other questions, Lex?
No.
Okay. Well, there's 3 questions that I ask everybody. We're about towards the end, so I want to ask you that. I know it flies by. It flies by. I've done some of these that I'm just like, oh my gosh, we've gone 3 hours. You know. So I'll ask you these 3 questions, and then if you want to expound anytime, Lexi, just jump in. Okay. And so the first question I have is, what would you say was your biggest success in life?
Wow. Going to get into another completely different territory than the entertainment business. Looking after my mother, who just passed away 3 months ago.
Oh, wow.
I have to go there to my mom.
Yeah. So it's obviously very close if you took care of her. Yeah.
An extraordinary woman, and I looked after her for the last 4 years and moved in with her the last year. And the greatest achievement isn't the right word, but it's my greatest gift because I had her as a mother, and it's my greatest gift giving back.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm in that world right now.
Yeah. I can imagine. Wow. And on the opposite end of that, what was your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
I think my biggest failure at the time was when I thought I was not going to be a ballet dancer, and that's all I wanted to be my whole life in the entertainment business. That's all I dreamed of. That's all I wanted. And I berated myself, talk about rejected my own self for many years after that. And then it took me a couple of years to get over that. And then I realized that I am not only my career, that there's more to life that I have to offer. And there's other options in careers. So I think that seemed like a failure at the time. I'd failed myself, and I'd failed what I wanted to achieve. But in the end, it all worked out. It was a huge life lesson for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lexi, you look like you're paying attention. Do you have a question or anything? Nope. Okay. Just making sure.
Just listening intensely.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think about, it's interesting. Not to say that being a ballet dancer wouldn't have been fantastic, but you've had such an amazing career expanding across all genres.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you kind of failed forward a little bit,
I didn't at the time know it, but now I appreciate what you said. Now I realize that it was meant to be, and failing forward. And failure is not a bad thing. That's another thing. Is it really failure, or is it a learning experience? And that's another thing that I tell people. You're not failing. You're just learning. It's a different mindset, and it helps.
Yeah, definitely. So the last question I ask everybody is, at some point, some farther down the road, and you may have thought about this a little bit with your mother passing, but one day you're going to pass away, and there'll be a funeral, and someone will give your eulogy. What's the one thing you hope somebody says about you in your eulogy?
She cared about others more than she cared about herself.
Charity. That's super important.
Number one for me. My father taught me that, and my mother.
Yeah.
They always looked after others, and that's I think my gift. That's what I want to be left, my legacy.
Awesome. Lexi, do you have anything else as we're wrapping up? Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. I mean, okay. What was the hardest part about in the entertainment business?
I think initially dealing with the rejection and not trusting in myself that I was enough and that what I had to offer was good enough. you know, there's a lot of insecurities. Everybody's insecure in life, and that's something we should realize, that even the people that are hiring us have insecurities. And that's, it's sort of funny. You sort of look at them and go, oh my God, they're not human, you know, but we're all human beings, and we all have the same foibles and the same loves and the same wants and the same hates. And, you know, people go about it in different ways. But I think if you just sort of look at it as you're enough and that you have enough to offer, you'll be fine. Lexi, you got a lot to offer. You know,
I agree. We had just had this we've been having conversations like that, you know, talking about that. And, you know, it's funny being just on the aside at the end, it's really fascinating. And I'm saying this for Lexi's benefit. It's really, this is my favorite part of being a dad, my favorite time of being a dad, because I've got 3 teenagers and one that's about to become one.
Oh, wow.
And watching them all it's so fascinating to watch them all go through. Like, her brother and her sister went through the exact same thing she's going through, differently with a different personality, but going through the same thing and trying to find yourself in your niche and build your confidence and all of these things. And it's just fun to watch as they deal with, you know, Lexi in particular, you know, getting a part in a place that she really likes and watching her enjoy that, and then maybe not getting a part another time and really going through some of the things that you're talking about right now. And so I'm really grateful that you came on and said some of the things you said, because what you've talked about being difficult is stuff that she's probably working, you know, that Lexi's probably working through right now. Right, Lex?
Kind of. I mean, I recently auditioned for a show at my school, Cinderella.
Oh, wow.
And I got
the new musical of Cinderella, that one?
Yeah, it's Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I got my first callback, because before they were workshops and they didn't really do callbacks, but I got my first like actual callback, and I ended up just getting in the ensemble, which was kind of strange, because I thought that like, they were considering me for a stepsister, but they were doing readings, and they had me read with my sister, and my sister, I said I didn't want it if it was because of my sister, because I have done shows with her before, and then I did Aristocats with her, and we got the geese, because the only reason we got the geese was because we could practice together, and we never did. And so I said that, if that was the reason I was going to get it, I don't want it.
No, I think that you were going to get it on your own merit, Lexi. They're not going to do that in a show. They don't take chances like that. So you got your own merit. And if you need any answers to any of your questions, I will get your dad my email, and I'm happy to answer your questions. And just remember, it's not you personally. It's not a slight at you personally. A lot of times in show business, there's so many other factors.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's really easy. She's very similar to me in that sometimes we take things that are not in our control and really personalize them, like there's something wrong with us.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And sometimes there's just external factors we don't even know about. And you know, I think she's a fantastic actor. She's done great things. I've watched her a number of times, and she thinks I just say that because I'm her dad. But she also to
say that.
But the thing is, but I would tell you if you stink. Anyhow, well, we've taken you over time.
Oh no, it doesn't matter. If you have anything else, I'm fine. An hour is so short for me too, so I talk for hours too. But is there anything else you need to know, Lexi? Anything else?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time so much, and if you could get me your email address for her, I'm sure she would like to have somebody to bounce ideas off of every once in a while.
How do I go about doing that?
You know, you can when I hit record in the recording, you can just give it directly to her. We'll stay on. Okay. So great. But for those who are listening, this has been great. I'm really excited we got to do this. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And Ms. Dubin, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully sometime we can do this again. So
lots more to talk about. Thank you so much for your great questions, both of you. I really appreciate it.
All right. And for all the listeners, subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.